top story right now. All three major indices hitting record highs since President Trump was elected into office. $6 trillion in value in the market since the election. But former President Obama says we should be thanking him for improving the economy. Watch this.
We have a stock market that has hit record highs 81 times since our election victory. 81 times. It's at a new high right now. Unemployment is at a 17-year low. Very shortly, it's going to be at a 19-year low. We have GDP getting up to 4, 5, and even 6% because I think that's possible.
We saw the U.S. economy grow consistently. We saw the longest streak of generation in American history by far. A streak that still continues, by the way. Thanks, Obama.
All right, let's bring in former chief strategist for Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign and chief strategist for President Bill Clinton's 1996 reelection. Microtrends Squared author Mark Penn is here. Mark, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. It's funny to hear President Obama saying, well, thanks, Obama.
Well, look, first of all, I think the American people will take credit for an improving economy over politicians any day, particularly in today's environment. But I think, look, under Obama's administration, the economy did improve. There was an economic crisis. There was stabilization. And I think now it's taking off. The truth is, I think, it's a handoff to higher growth. And there's no question that people thought Obama did a good job on the economy.
Let's not forget that under President Obama, the federal pages went to 97,000 because of all of the rules and regulations that he put in place. It is that reason that businesses did not spend under President Obama. Now they're opening their purse strings.
Which is why deregulation is such an important catalyst for the economy. It requires no stroke of pen from Congress. It's simply not instituting rules and revisiting the rules that have been put in place historically.
Well, I can tell you what's going on with President Obama. He did not, as many presidents have not in recent history, taken credit for the stock market moving up because they were worried and advised by their closest allies, don't talk too much about the stock market because it'll turn against you and then you own the decline. And it's like President Reagan, 87 crash, stocks go up, stocks go down, is what he said. So President Obama now is trying to remind people, hey, you know, the market bottomed on my administration and went basically straight up from early 2009. So he's trying to take some of the credit away from President Trump. And I'll point out to the president, as I have in the past, he owns it on the way up. That means you're going to own it on the way down. And it can turn against you on a dime for unexpected reasons.
But I think Mark's right. I think the point Mark made is that the country was in shambles. The economy was in the tubes. We were having a very big crisis.
2008 financial crisis.
So it's like someone diagnosed with cancer. And so Obama was radiation and chemotherapy. And now the patient stabilized, and regulation was also a preventative method. And now
too much of it.
Way too much.
It was too much of it.
Way too much. But what you had is this great racehorse, the American economy, being nursed back to health and then being held back. Now you've got Trump that's saying let it go and let's take off the restraints.
I don't think it was part of the chemotherapy and radiation, the overregulation. That was again, don't let a good crisis go to waste, is what Rahm Emanuel said.
Yeah.
It was because Democrats believe in bigger government, and it's like we want to do a power grab when we can do it because again we want to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because we can do an end around the Constitution and create this power center for future Democrats.
And put in a few czars while you're at it.
So let's get Mark's take on the future of the Democratic Party. You wrote a great editorial in the New York Times in July arguing that the Democratic Party needed to become more centrist, more moderate. What did you mean? What do you see as being the go-forward steps?
Well, look, I think that the Democratic Party needs to reform. It needs to get rid of caucuses. It needs to have primaries. It needs to reform the DNC. I think it needs to be for open primaries. I think that it's got to make room for the typical Democratic voter, which frankly is a lot more centrist than comes across on TV.
Right. I always say that most people in America, you're sort of hanging out in the middle. You might lean to the right on some issues, lean to the left on other issues, but you're hanging out in the middle. And then these extremists have hijacked the parties.
Yeah, I say America's like a restaurant where you could just order chicken or fish, and people want steak. And so most voters are really in the moderate column, and they don't really get what they want out of politics today.
So are the Democrats doing what you're saying?
I think today's a good test. Let's see what happens. Do you think Pelosi and Schumer are going to be able to move to the center, make a compromise with the president, and show that they're going to work with the administration or not? I think today's a big test.
And today's going to be a big test, not to tee up whether Senator Al Franken does walk on the floor of the Senate and resign today.
That's right.
Because, again, the politics of all of this is they're trying to garner more females, garner the female vote. The Democrats were surprised by how many women voted for Donald Trump, and they're making it about the female voter, and they're making it about female candidates. So are they waging or beginning to a war on men?
Yeah.
And where does that send those core Democratic voters? Does it send them to the Republican Party?
Because Dagan, an ABC affiliate out of St. Paul, Minnesota, is reporting Senator Al Franken will make an announcement on his political future today from the Senate floor. And then 30 Democratic senators say it is time for him just to resign.
Yeah, but look, I think that because there's a lot of pressure after what was done with Conyers, you take Franken, who was a comedian for 37 years, while Conyers for 52 years was serving the nation, and before that fighting the civil rights movement. And at 88 years old, they kick him to the curb because they want to be able to go after Roy Moore. I think the problem with the Democratic Party is they've run out of ideas, and they've hijacked the primary system, as Mark pointed out, with these super delegates. And so no organically grown candidate can prevail and come out of the nominating process unless there is just a tidal wave like an Obama campaign. And so you have an undemocratic primary process to begin with that's corrupted and geared towards a front runner and an insider. So how do we get, Mark, a Democratic Party that actually is reflective of Democrats? Because I'm a Democrat. I think you still are a Democrat. And both, I know I'm at the center space.
Some are hanging on by their fingernails. What do you think?
This becomes an issue of race, gender, in addition to politics within the Democratic Party.
Well, I also think it's about being pro-business. To be a pro-business Democrat used to be a pretty big category. To be a pro-defense Democrat used to be a pretty big category. So I think we need to welcome back really an acceptance that if the economy is not moving forward, if it's not growing, you're not really able to help people on health care and education and the other programs. And just one thing I'll say is President Clinton would never have resigned. Right, and didn't resign. So this will be a big change in politics if Franken resigns today.
But did he have the number of Democrats calling for his resignation, though, that Al Franken has 30?
No, he had one, Senator Lieberman.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying he had one.
Really quickly, I want to point out Wall Street Journal editorial page is saying that the president should withdraw his endorsement of Judge Roy Moore and the RNC should join him. Would it be embarrassing? But they need to, the Journal is saying, disavow Roy Moore because this will hang around the neck of every Republican candidate 2018 and 3 years from now.
Just quickly while we have you, Mark, what's your view on the midterm elections? A month ago, before tax reform, in the wake of the failure of health care, there was a call that the House may turn, or the Senate may turn. What's your view?
Democrats have the edge in every poll right now. And it's typical, to be honest, in almost every midterm after a new president comes in. So if Republicans want to get stuff done, they better get it done now because that door almost always closes, and that's what the polls are showing today. And they failed to sell tax reform either. They got creamed on health care, and they're winning somewhat better on taxes, but they haven't really sold a solid message on it.
Bottom line, Mark, great to see you.
Thank
you so much. Mark Penn there.
President Obama taking credit this week for an economy that continues growing under President Trump. Charlie, who's got it right?
It's Trump's economy now. And here's why I will say this. If you look at the sort of trajectory, first off, generally economic expansion's last 7 years, it should have been done around the time that he left office. And the amount of growth that came post-Trump, and by the way, before you jump down my throat, I am no Trumpkin. You know, I hammer him whatever I can.
That's for sure.
But if you look at the wage growth, there's been wage growth. You look at the
so that acceleration is on the president.
And
president.
And here's why. And he didn't have to do
Real
one
quick.
thing. He had to do one thing, but say no more regulations. It's a massive tax cut. And I'll tell you, it's got to give it.
He's going to
credit.
tweet what you just said within seconds. Payne.
President Trump has unleashed this economy.
Yeah.
He really has. And initially they called it soft data because they were surveys. Now it's hard data and jobs and all kinds of other economic data. This is Trump's economy, and it's on fire right now.
Danielle, whose economy is this?
Well, I'm going to say it's mostly Obama's. Thanks, Obama. But I will say that we've seen the stock market. You know, you're looking at a graph and you see the gradient incline. You know that there is enormous amounts of business confidence. Consumer confidence is also on an incline.
Don't forget GDP.
GDP is great, and GDP per capita has been, you know, also on an incline.
But would that GDP be happening now? Let's say we were in the 9th year of an Obama administration.
GDP is 1.5% per year average under Obama.
Right. Okay. That's fine.
That's a big difference.
No, let her answer. Let her answer.
Okay. All I will say is if you take sort of a 7-year view or an 8-year view after we got out of the kind of hole and we had the stimulus package, there were indicators of economic health that are continuing under Trump that we saw really come out. We came out of the Great Depression because of President Obama.
When you hit bottom, and Ben is an economist, he'll tell you this, when you hit bottom, you generally get a V-shaped recovery.
Yeah. It's called elasticity in economics.
Sure, because you hit so far down and you put all that stimulus. Guess what we got? We got kind of a, I don't know, a little V, tiny V.
All right, Ben Stein, who gets the credit here, Ben?
Okay. Well, I think Mr. Obama gets the credit for very sound fiscal and monetary policies when the economy was struggling and was in real terrible shape. Although I think Ms. Yellen gets a tremendous amount of credit as well. She doesn't get the credit she deserves. She shouldn't go down in history. But what I'm looking at and worrying like mad about is inflation. When we are running hyper-stimulative government fiscal policies in the midst of full employment, that almost always leads to inflation, and I am very, very worried that my daughter and my son are going to be living in a hyper-stimulative economy.
They have a hyper-stimulative dad. I think that's the problem there.
Okay, President Obama trying to take credit for the Trump economy, and congratulations, looks like in November, 228,000 jobs were at an unemployment rate now at a 17-year low. Former president says you can thank him for that. Roll it.
We saw the longest streak of job creation in American history by far, a streak that still continues, by the way. Thanks, Obama.
And he didn't actually stop there. He compared President Trump to Hitler. Quote, "We have to tend to this garden of democracy or else things could fall apart quickly." That's what happened in Germany in the 1930s, which, despite the democracy of the Weimar Republic and centuries of high-level cultural and scientific achievements, Adolf Hitler rose to dominate. 60 million people died. So you've got to pay attention and vote. Let's just take this one step at a time because it makes me very angry. Just start with the economy first. They said the President Trump was going to crash the economy. Now it's doing really well, and they think it's Obama's credit.
I think it's laughable that President Obama thinks he has anything to do with the success of where the economy is right now. The economy was just over 1% GDP when President Trump took over, and it has just gradually gone up. We expect it is possible to hit 4% GDP by the first quarter next year. Jobs are growing. This is all a direct result, not just of President Trump swearing in, but from the minute he was elected, consumer confidence got stronger. Businesses wanted to participate in our economy again because they have confidence in this president. He's gotten rid of regulations that have allowed them to create jobs, that have allowed our economy to grow. There's a reason that it continues to go up, and it started when President Trump was elected and when he got into office. It had nothing to do with President Obama, and I think everybody knows it, including President Obama, and I think it's pretty laughable that he's trying to take credit for it.
And this was probably, I think, the best month all time for manufacturing jobs. So that's something that every American can be proud of.
Yeah, it's interesting that after 8 years of him having, struggles, once President Trump comes into office, all of a sudden the activity that he did for 8 years is now working. I mean, that's pretty bad logic.
He timed it perfectly. Now, so this comparison to Adolf Hitler really sickens me. I thought more of President Obama. I didn't think he'd stoop to that low. I think he's probably bitter because his legacy is being dismantled. But to compare, someone, your colleague, there's only a few people that hold that position. To compare him to a genocidal war criminal is just disgusting.
It's very surprising. I'm with you. I wouldn't have thought that President Obama would have gone that direction. Certainly something I don't think that any of us would have expected. Hopefully he'll see the damage a comment like that makes and withdraw that type of comparison. Not only is it an outrageous comment to make, but it's just completely factually untrue and just very inaccurate. And so hopefully the president will see that and President Obama will withdraw that comment.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Jesse. Merry Christmas.